Welcome to this episode of Wine Terroir. On this episode, I'm not going to taste any wine or rate any wine, but I am going to talk about wine ratings and why I think they're good. Let's talk wine ratings. Sure, some people just want you to feel the wine, experience the wine, and that's great and all. But for me, I like to judge a wine right here, right now, and where is it at, and then come back and taste that wine, either the same vintage or another bottling, and look back and say, where did I think that wine was at? The wine scoring system, whether you use the 20-point scale or the 100-point scale or the 5-star scale, doesn't matter. It's just a reference point for a snapshot in time. I use the 100-point scale, and we call it a 100-point scale because it goes to 100. But in reality, most people think of it as a 50-point scale between 100 and 50. However, I really think about it as a 20-point scale, which is between 100 and 80. And in today's winemaking society, most wines are probably over 80-point wines, unless there's a major flaw. And I tend not to rate a wine if it's corked. I would usually say not rated or things like that. If there are major flaws like a lot of Brett or some other factors, that is definitely a winemaker's choice. I will score those and tend to be below 80. And for me, below 80 is basically not really palatable. So that leaves me from 80 to 84 is basically from palatable, serviceable. I can serve this to someone, to okay. And then we get from 85 to 89, it's basically getting from okay to, very good, or good to very good. And then above that, I'm looking from 90 to 95 are usually exceptional wines, where it's like from the high end of very good or exceptional to extremely exceptional. And there's a bell curve on all these ratings, because to go to the 96 to 100, that scale, those are like earth-shattering, mind-blowing wines that basically, you have crazy dreams about. It's that good, or it leaves an imprint on you. And for me, it's rare that I will score something in that 96 to 100. And I think every person who reviews wine is different. So the scoring system really doesn't matter. So if I rate it 90 points, doesn't mean someone else will rate it, a 95. Is that okay? Sure, as long as you understand their reference points. Going on to my little rant, like a lot of people give Robert Parker, who basically made this 100-point system really, really popular, a lot of flack because he's Parkeritized a lot of scores. A lot of people are buying wines just because there are certain ratings. You gotta look at more than just the number and more than just what he's assigned. You gotta look at the reviews that were written and see if you agree with it. And so for me, I write a lot of technical reviews where I break down sweetness level, acidity level, tannins, body, alcohol level, and you have to figure out what works for you. And for example, I'm actually a really big fan of Robert Parker's scores for Napa wines, Rhone wines, and Bordeaux. I really don't care what he says about Burgundy. At that point, I'm going to go look at what Alan Meadows and other people say about Burgundy that I have a lot more faith in, that they understand and are more aligned with my palate. So it's not one critic to rule them all. It's basically you have to find where your palates are in alignment, and then start to, okay, I'm with you here. We have a commonality, and then you can start to trust that person will actually be giving things. So if you just quickly look at any of my reviews and it's like, oh, this person rated it that, but actually don't read the review, you're probably missing out a ton of information that may actually give you a lot more guidance to understanding how I rated it. And understand why I rated it what I rated. 80% of the wines that I think I taste are going to be in the low 90s to low 80s. I would say 80% of the wines there. And then you're going to get the few outliers of subpar wines that are going to be in the below 80. And then you're going to get the few exceptional wines that are going to be rock stars above 90, 94, 95, 96, up to 100. And so that's just my take on wine ratings. The other thing I'll say about wine ratings, a lot of people, especially when they were doing Bordeaux reviews and things like that, people are tasting these wines out of barrel. And tasting out of barrel is very, very different than tasting it in bottle several years down the road. And so for me, when I try, and I do my best to do it is to not assess potential, and I'll usually speak to how long I think the wine can age or how it'll develop and how much life it has left in it. And I think that's a separate like analysis that I'm trying to do and provide context to, but I usually try not to reflect that in the score. For me, I'm usually rating the wine right here, right now, and it's hard to stay within that box, especially if you're tasting really young wine, like current release or pre-release Bordeaux. But for me, that is really important to say, like, where is this wine right here, right now? So you will very rarely see me taste a current release or pre-release Bordeaux and be like, this is a 100-point wine, because it hasn't demonstrated that it could get to 100 points in my mind. Let's talk about ageability. And so if a wine is delicious and yummy, but I don't think it can age or develop or get these kind of like tertiary complexities, it's going to be very hard for it to get in that upper echelon of scores. And I think there's a couple outliers in that, like, I think a Condrieu, when it's done perfectly well, those Viogniers, when it's done perfectly well, those are a young wine that can actually potentially get a really high score. I think those are outliers. For the most part, wines improve over time, and I think most people drink wines way too young. And for me, when I drink an older wine that's just kind of like, it's got a myriad of flavors, and it's really coming together and it's really harmonious, there's something to be said about that is really, really exceptional. And I think that is something that should be cherished and something that people should look out for. And wine prices in many, many regions are crazy today. And that's why I'm a big believer in purchasing wines on auction for people who have whatever financial reasons why they have to sell their wine, whether it's death, divorce, and debt, or the 3 Ds of selling wines. So for whatever reason, they may have to offload their wine and they want to get rid of it. And you can find some great deals. You can often buy 10-year-old, 15-year-old Bordeaux's for cheaper prices than what you can buy the current release or a couple of years even on premier release price. So I think those values are something that the general public doesn't really look towards. And most people, when they just go to the wine shop, they're looking for things. But even a really good wine shop will have some back release things, and it can be very interesting to taste things that are aged, because I think that you'll get these complexities that can only come from bottle age. No matter how much you decant a wine or what aerator you put it through or how quickly you spin it in a centrifuge, it doesn't matter. When it sits in a bottle for 15, 20 years, it can develop beautiful flavors. It can also turn to vinegar. So you're rolling the dice when you're doing that. But I think that's an important factor. So I use wine ratings. I try to make it a snapshot in time, but I try to give really fundamental technical reviews of how's its aromatics, how's it on the palate, the palate and the aromatics differ. What's the texture like? What's the alcohol like? Is it coming together? And then what's the finish like? And then do I think it actually will sit there and improve? Do I think it's at its drinking window now? Do I think it's past its prime? And assess that kind of where it is right now, and then provide guidance to it. I'm not Nostradamus. I don't have a crystal ball to let you know whether or not that's right or not. That is my gut and instinct of what I've experienced from all the tasting of older wines, and how does that align from the vertical tastings I've done of wines that I've tasted over time. Take it all with a grain of salt. Try to align your palate with other people and understand, like, hey, when they talk about Burgundy, or when they talk about Riesling, or when they talk about Rioja, are you guys aligned on that? And if you're aligned on that, then maybe you should start to look towards their recommendations. And if you're not aligned, look towards other people. Everybody has their own palate, and people's palates change over time. That's all for this episode. Just wanted to give you my 2 cents on the wine rating system and why I use it and why I think it's an interesting evaluation for wine where it is right now. Thanks a lot. And if you like this episode, please hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button as well. And you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for more daily updates on the wines that we're tasting. Thank you so much. Cheers.